All right, today's stress-free SEO topic is all about creating the right types of content for large language model search. And when I talk about large language model search, I'm talking about any AI search tool that you and your audience might use. Everything from Google's AI mode, which you can see in the picture here, all the way through to things like ChatGPT and Claude. Any kind of conversation that someone is having with an AI tool and it's having the AI tool search the internet for them counts as an LLM search. And the type of content that works well for targeting people through LLM search can be a little bit different than what works best for traditional Google search results. Now, that doesn't mean you need to create duplicates of your content. It doesn't mean that you need to completely rethink everything about your content strategy, but it does mean that depending on who you want to reach and what you want to reach them about, you may need to choose a different type of content than you would have in the past, or you may need to simply put more upfront thought into what kind of content you're going to create versus just writing a blog post and putting it on your website. So let's dive into what this means. So LLM search, again, that's any AI search process, isn't quite the same as Google search. Now, when someone is chatting with an LLM, and you probably know this yourself from having used AI tools, is that people almost never type in one word or even two or three words. They ask full and often multi-part questions. They might be asking two things in one go. They might also be referencing something that they had said previously in the same chat. So a search can actually take place over the course of multiple questions and prompts to the AI. Now, one article on your website has the ability to appear in an LLM's answer for a wide range of questions. So in the past, not always, but generally speaking, if you wrote a blog post and you wanted it to appear in Google search, you would target it to one, maybe two specific keywords. In this case, we want to think with LLM search, it's more like thinking about broad overarching topics. What are the various questions someone might ask under this topic? And your article can, or your web page can appear in the results for multiple questions. As an example, I wrote a blog post for one of my clients. It has one clear topic, but there are a lot of subtopics covered in the article, a lot of individual questions that we answer. That one web page currently appears in over 85 AI overview / AI mode chats. So for like 85 different topics, it comes up as one of the results. Now, it's a little harder to figure out exactly what people are typing into their LLM chats. That data is not as public as it is with traditional Google searches. And what people type in their questions they ask, those answers that they get, those are heavily influenced by both how the searcher frames their question, what kind of language patterns they use, and also what they've searched in the past. Their search history is a big part of it. But that's okay. You don't need to know exactly what someone is typing in verbatim. You need to know the overarching topics and what kind of information they want to get out of the search. And these are things that we can determine. Now, video, images, and product pages can indeed appear in LLM results, but they can be less frequent. Google is most likely to show a mix of video, image, shopping, and text results. Other platforms like ChatGPT and Claude tend to skew more towards just providing snippets from and links to text-based blog posts. I have seen some videos show up in some ChatGPT search results, but not as many in Google. So if you know that your audience is likely interested in using, say, ChatGPT or Claude to find information, if you know that they are chatting with these tools a lot, maybe using it to help them run their businesses, then in that case, focusing on text-based content is going to be very good for you. And if you don't like writing, that's okay. You can still film a video or record a podcast and use the transcript as a blog post. But you'll want to make sure you have that text content on your website, because if people are using ChatGPT and Claude, they're more likely to find that as a source in their AI chats. And also, when your website appears in Google search, as you know, there's always a link to your website in that long list of potential websites that come up in the search results. But when we're talking about AI searches, you may find that your site is linked, but you also may find that your name or your brand name is simply mentioned, but there isn't a link. Both instances are still valid, even if you're not linked directly. The fact that your brand appears or a piece of content from your website appears is still valuable because it builds brand awareness. This is true across all industries, but especially in the business-to-business industry. So if your clients are businesses, if your customers are businesses, those decision makers are more likely to ask ChatGPT or Claude or Google's AI mode for information about a brand or for resources for how to do XYZ, in which your brand may appear in the results. And then they will take note of who is mentioned and go do their own research. Individual consumers are a little more likely to actually click links that are provided to them in the chat. So if you have a business in which you are selling directly to consumers, it can benefit you to do everything in your power to get yourself actually linked in the chat. But if you have business customers, it doesn't really matter. As long as you're mentioned, that's still highly valuable. Now, there are two ways, again, that you can appear in LLMs. I did just touch on this, but let's break it down further. So a mention, because I'm going to use these words throughout the call today. A mention is when the AI tool says your name, your products, or your services like in the course of its response, but it doesn't include a link, and citations do have the link. Sometimes that is directly in the response. Sometimes it is in a sidebar, and it might even be in a footnote. Now, let's talk about why LLMs like certain content. And to start this off, I want to address some myths that you yourself may have thought or heard as you were, going about your marketing work. So the first myth is that LLMs like content when it's written by an AI. This is extremely common. A lot of people think that in order for an AI tool to mention or cite you, you actually need to use AI to write your web pages. But this is not accurate. Search Engine Journal, which is a long-standing SEO publication, very reputable, they found in an experiment that after 90 days, only 3% of AI-generated web pages still ranked in the top 100 results. So if you're producing content with AI, you have to produce an extremely high volume of it in order to get your site to consistently appear highly in any search result, traditional or AI. And if you do that, if you create an ultra high volume, you actually run the risk of getting flagged as spam, and then you won't show up in the search results at all. So the best thing that you can do here is to really focus as much as possible on writing content or publishing content that is human written, whether that's you doing it or a member of your team. Making sure that it is human produced will actually serve you better in the long run. AI tools get worse over time if they consume and are trained on AI generated content. So these algorithms are built in a way that they seek out and prioritize human created content. That's not to say that you can't still use AI in the content creation process if you want, but you'll want to use it earlier on. I know a lot of people will write something themselves and then put it into AI, have AI, quote unquote, polish it up, and then they take the result and put it on their website. You actually want to reverse that. If you're going to use AI in the process, you'd want to use it to help maybe organize your thoughts or develop an article, blog post outline, and then do the actual writing yourself or have a member of your team do it. The second myth is that AI search tools will prefer to rank content that looks like AI. And by that, I mean writing in very, very short paragraphs, doing an insane amount of bullet points, and basically mimicking the structure of a ChatGPT or a Claude answer. But this isn't necessary. Generative AI is trained on human content. It is fully capable of scanning a web page and understanding what is in it without the writer mimicking how an AI puts out text. So you don't need to worry about that. You can write in whatever normal, natural voice you would, use the language that you would normally use. And that's all very important because, again, it shows that this was indeed written by a person. The third myth is that your content needs to have a summary. You may have noticed this, but an increasing number of web pages are putting a quick summary at the top. You can do this if you want. It can be beneficial if you say or have maybe a white paper that you published that's very technical, very, very long. You want to give kind of that abstract, almost like there would be on a research paper right at the top. But you do not need to put this on every single blog post. I see some very short, straightforward blog posts that have this summary section at the top. The idea is that this will entice an LLM to show the page in search, or it will tell the LLM what the page is about. These tools can process text at warp speed. We don't need to spend our valuable time creating a summary to put on the page for AI. AI doesn't need it. And lastly, a big myth that can actually hurt you if you do this is to put an AI, a summarize with AI button on the top of your blog post or your web page. And generally what this does is if someone clicks it, it sends them over to ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever you say is going to happen when they click the button. And that tool summarizes your web page for them. This has two problems. One, it is immediately sending someone off of your website as soon as they enter your website. What that does is it signals to search engines that whatever was on your page wasn't what the person was looking for, that your page wasn't valuable, and it degrades your quality score essentially over time. Search engine algorithms will think, okay, well, this page, 80% of the people who landed on this page left immediately, so clearly we shouldn't show it to more people. The search engine algorithms don't have the context to understand that it was because you were sending them over to their favorite AI tool to summarize it. The second way it can hurt you is that these AI tools are aware of people doing it. Like ChatGPT knows people do this and knows that people are doing this to try to game the system and get their URLs shown to ChatGPT more and more and more. Same thing with Claude. And so they are considering it to be a spammy, scammy kind of tactic, and it can actually make your site less favorable to the LLMs that are searching for information, not more favorable. So if anyone tells you to do one of these four things, you can very confidently ignore them. There is no foundational basis in this whatsoever, and they can hurt you more than help you in the long run. Now, there are two things that you can do to really help the likelihood that your content gets picked up by an LLM search tool. The first one is making sure that the content answers a human request. Very straightforward, very simple. This actually applies to regular search too. There's not a ton of differences between the way that traditional search engines like Google work and the way that AI search engines work. Google itself has come out and said there's that generative engine optimization, sometimes called answer engine optimization, isn't really its own thing. Yes, you do need to think about what kind of content to create slightly differently, but at its core, at the end of the day, the goal is to provide a human with information. So the content has to answer a human request. Now, 70% of traditional, that means like using Google, Bing, etc., searches have an informational intent. If you've watched any of my previous sessions, you may remember that there are 4 kinds of search intent. There is informational, which is just as it sounds, someone seeking information. There is navigational, which is not real world directions, but rather someone looking for a certain page on your website, like a download page or a login page. There is commercial, which is where someone is not ready to buy, but they're getting close. They're doing research. Like if you were trying to compare different computer monitors to see which one you wanted to buy, that would be a commercial search. And transactional, which is when the searcher knows what they want to buy and they're looking for a source to do so. So using the previous example, let's say you had compared a bunch of computer monitors. You decided you wanted to buy a Samsung. You wanted it to be 24 inches. You'd type that in, go right to, say, Best Buy's website, and make the purchase. That would be transactional. Now, according to SE Ranking, which is a very respectable SEO tool, informational intent is still extremely strong in AI searches. So when someone talks to Google, almost 2/3 of those conversations are because someone wants information. When someone talks to AI, again, it's still very strong, but about almost 40% of searches are to generate something specific. So there's like 10% of people who, when they use AI, they're not seeking just information, they are seeking to create something. So like 10% of people who otherwise would have searched for information are now searching for a way to create something. They want AI's help in making something specific. So first, we're going to talk about that informational aspect, since that is still the bulk, about 60% of searches done through AI tools. So more than half of people want to get information. So you need to ask yourself 2 things. The first is you have to ask yourself, what does my customer want to learn? You have to think about, what does my customer want to learn? And also, you need to think about, how much do they know already? So what do they want to learn? That's going to guide what topic you're going to write about. And how much do they know about it already? That informs what kind of subtopics you're going to cover, maybe what kind of language and how advanced the text you write is going to be. So there are 2 types of content that you can typically write to target these informational searches. So this would make up, for most people who have a service business or a business to business type of company, about, you're targeting like 60% of the traffic that comes to your website is going to be seeking informational stuff. So I would make about 60% of the content on your website fall into one of these 2 buckets, either thought leadership or informational blog posts. Now, thought leadership is going to be a first-person narrative written by an expert. In this case, if you own your own business, most likely yourself, talking about your take on something in the industry. The trick here is to make sure that you are talking to your customer and not talking to your peers. It's very easy when writing thought leadership to write as if we are speaking to someone else who has the same job as us. But we actually want to be speaking to our customer. We want to be thinking, okay, if our customer is searching for information from an expert, if let's say I was doing a free consult, what might they ask me and what would I tell them? That's the kind of information that you can put into thought leadership and really have a lot of I statements, in my experience statements. You can back it up with examples from things that you've done, situations you've been in. And what this does is it provides AI tools with really rich, valuable, and unique content that it can quote and link to in results. So, we've all been on the internet. We know that a lot of it is repeated, a lot of the same concepts and ideas over and over again. That's not to say that you have to publish something that is a completely new and novel text each time. I don't expect anyone to be out here running like full-on research experiments every time you want to write a blog post, but you do want to think about how you can take a topic and add your personal take on it based on your experience. What this does over time is it builds brand awareness. These types of content, thought leadership articles, are likely to be mentioned and sometimes cited along with the concepts you're talking about. So, as you know, I'm sure from using an AI tool, they will lift part of the text and give it in the response. So, this is the kind of thing that the AI will say, oh, so and so says XYZ, and provide your name, your brand name in that context. And it really helps to both, one, teach the LLM what you're an expert on, and two, begin to build brand awareness in the searcher's mind as they are looking for information and trying to determine who they can trust. The second type of content you can create is probably very familiar to you. It's informational blogs. This is very akin to what a lot of you have probably done in the past for traditional search engine optimization. It's really showing that your brand provides key resources and documentation. This is a place where you are still going to want to, whenever possible, talk about your expertise, or maybe in this case, you're writing as your company voice, so your company's expertise. You can do a little bit more mentioning of products and services here, how they directly relate to larger industry concerns. So thought leadership, you want to focus more on high level concepts and experiences. Informational blogs, that's where you can start to get a little more salesy, not super salesy. We're not writing a sales funnel here, but maybe at the end of this one, you have a CTA for someone to sign up for your email newsletter or for an upcoming program. It is completely fine if other brands are publishing similar guides to yours. You want to try to make yourself better than your competitors wherever possible and leverage your experience. You can link to your thought leadership that you've published on the topic to sort of reinforce the information that you're sharing here. But while thought leadership should be as unique as possible, informational blogs you can be a little more like, one of the pack with. But it's important to have on your website because as someone is looking for information, the LLMs can surface that and potentially reference specific services that you offer, that you discuss in those informational blogs. Now, the other type of content that makes about 40% was where people are asking the LLM to prepare something for them. So in this case, you need to make sure that LLMs actually understand what your brand does and how it helps customers. Now, you won't be able to appear in every single result that is someone asking AI to prepare something for them. We all know that folks go to AI tools and they'll say, hey, write a blog post for me, write an email for me. Those are preparatory requests that, of course, you are unlikely to appear in unless maybe someone said, hey, write a blog post for me talking about the 10 best email marketing companies in Kansas, and you are an email marketing company in Kansas. Then you might appear in that. But generally speaking, there are going to be instances where someone is asking the AI to create a personal asset for them. So no brand mentions or citations for anyone are going to happen. But other times, and again, this is very much the case in business-to-business industries, though it can also happen in consumer industries. People are going to ask the LLM to help prepare lists of experts, things they need to be aware of, information they need to know. So it has some overlap with the informational queries, but rather than doing just a straight search, the LLM is actually producing a document with some of this information. So again, to appear in these searches, you need to make sure that the LLM knows what you do, and that is through your content. Again, you don't have to do any of those myths we talked about. There's no way to trick the LLM into knowing what your brand does. It all happens through the information that you put online. You can do this by creating two particular types of content. So the first one is an X versus Y comparison. So very like apples versus oranges. You want to showcase your brand and how it stands apart from competitors. You can do, just as I say here, X versus Y, like your brand versus a single competitor. You can also take more of a listicle approach where you are comparing yourself to more than one competitor. I would keep it fairly tight in this case when you're talking about competitors. Don't make a huge list of, say, 20, but maybe cap it out at like 3 or 4. But I have found personally that doing one-to-one comparisons is extremely valuable for getting your brand to show up in AI search results. Again, this is the kind of content that I see appear in dozens upon dozens upon dozens of AI overviews and AI mode results, like the same page appearing in 10, 20, 30, 40 different chat results. So one page can take you very far. It's going to be a chance to showcase your brand and how it stands apart from competitors. Now, this must be factual. This cannot be just an opinion piece. It has to be factual, has to be linked to sources, and trust me here, at times you're going to want to be complimentary of your competitor. I actually do this a lot for my clients. We will write a comparative piece, and you never trash your competitor. You actually, because that can open up a whole can of worms, which I'm not a lawyer, but you can get in trouble for making claims about people that aren't true. So doesn't mean you have to be effusive and glowing and say, oh, we're exactly the same. But what you want to do is approach it from as complimentary of a standpoint as possible. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll say, when I'm writing a piece for a client, I'll say, okay, so we offer ABC. If you're really looking for XYZ, then you might want to try our competitor. And here's why. They do a good job with XYZ. But for folks who are predominantly focused on getting result ABC, we're going to be the best option. So again, not trashing anyone, not saying anything that isn't true, and actually highlighting when someone else is good at something that I don't offer or I don't do. It can feel weird at first, for sure, but it is good to do over time. It presents your content as more objective and more expert written versus straight marketing content. It absolutely is marketing content, and you are promoting yourself more than anyone else. And you can call out things you don't like about a competitor. I will do that for my clients. I'll say, when I was using competitor 1, I didn't love that, XYZ happened, but that is something real and true that I could provide a screenshot of if someone asked. It's factual. But doing this can help it read as a little less straight marketing-y and provide the context that the LLM needs to understand how your brand is similar to and different from specific competitors. The other kind of content you can create in order to help an LLM include you in certain things it prepares for its users are case studies. A case study demonstrates your credibility. It reinforces what you say in your thought leadership pieces. And this particularly helps inform when and how an LLM might mention you if a person asks for a list of businesses that do XYZ, or if maybe someone has gained brand awareness of you over time and they ask the LLM to prepare a pro and con list of you versus 2 of your competitors. It can cite information from both your comparison articles and also the case studies to provide further context for the searcher. So both of these kinds of content will be very helpful. Again, since this type of search makes up about 40% of the requests that the LLMs are getting, you don't have to write as many of these as you do the thought leadership and the informational blogs, but I would make at least 20%, if not the full 40% of your content these, and just make sure they're really good. So you might want to take a little more time on these. There's going to have to be more research. If you're very well versed in your industry and your expertise, you may be able to sit down and write a thought leadership blog post quite quickly. Doing a full comparison or case study, with data and maybe screenshots, maybe a customer quote, that can take a little bit longer, but it's worth investing the time in it for this purpose of helping the LLM understand what you do and increasing the likelihood that you are included in the outputs that it prepares. Now, all of this content works and builds upon itself. So first off, thought leadership and first-person insights show that you have experience and an expertise in your field. So if you have nothing on your website right now, start with that. Write a piece of thought leadership. Talk about your expertise. Write as if you were giving someone who's come to you your expert opinion on their issue. Next, You want to build out those comparative articles and informational guides to illustrate how you use the expertise from that you mentioned in your thought leadership. These types of articles, these informational guides and comparison pieces further cement how you use that expertise to stand apart from your competitors. Third, you can add case studies into the mix, offering data and proof that you do indeed know what you're doing and that, what you said in your thought leadership articles is in fact reliable. And in the end, ultimately, you will, with all of this content on your site, you will be able to appear in a wider range of search results and pick up more mentions and more citations that actually link to your site. And the more that happens, the more you reinforce your expert profile that you started building in stage 1, and then that cycle just sort of continues and builds upon itself. SEO has very much of a snowball effect. Like, it can be slow to get started, but once you do and you've been creating content and writing content that links back to other things you've written and you're starting to get picked up and mentioned by more people and in more AI chats, it builds upon itself and it helps you build a bigger and a bigger profile over time. And then eventually you're going to see a much faster, wider reaching result from any new pieces of content you create than you did when you were first starting out. Now, those 4 types of content we talked about, those are answering the human requests. The other thing you need to think about to get an LLM to pick you up is how well the content both aligns with and is different from existing results. So, your content should be similar to what is already appearing in AI chat results, meaning that it's in an expected format. So if you go to ChatGPT and you type in some questions that you think your potential customer might be asking, and you ask it to do a web search, look at the content that it comes back with. Look to see if it's mostly product pages and sales pages. Is it mostly thought leadership articles? Is it a lot of listicles? Is it really in-depth, like super detailed how-to guides? Doesn't mean you have to replicate that one-to-one, but you'll want to make sure that what you're creating is in a related format. So if I go do a search and I see that ChatGPT is only citing deep informational how-to guides, like tons of information, and I put together a really high-level, like salesy blog post, I'm probably not going to appear in future iterations of similar chat results because I'm not meeting the need that the algorithm has ascertained that most people want in their results. You also want to make sure that you are matching a similar search intent. So again, if I search in ChatGPT and I see that most of the results I'm getting for questions on a particular topic are very informational, it will not behoove me to just write up like a product listicle with links to 5 different things I sell. I would want to, again, focus on that informational intent, which, again, as we've touched on, is the bulk of the searches people are making when they are chatting with an LLM. Also want to make sure I'm speaking to the right level. So if I'm creating thought leadership, I really need to know who is my audience. Am I speaking to a stressed out mom? Am I speaking to a high-level executive? Am I speaking to a junior buyer? Understanding your audience and the different people you're talking to will help you tailor your thought leadership, informational blog posts, comparison articles to the right audience. Case studies, you don't have to tailor to a particular audience quite as much. You just really need to prove that you can do what you can say you do. But those guides, comparison pieces, and thought leadership, you want to make sure you're talking to the right audience level. And again, if you're running searches in ChatGPT to see what it's saying about specific topics, you can get a feel for that by looking at what other people are saying and how the AI is presenting it. Is it presenting it in more of a high level manner? Is it presenting it in more of a basic junior level manner? Now remember, if you're running these searches yourself to test it, it is influenced by how you talk to it and your previous chats. So if you're going to be testing out what kinds of results come up in different question chats, I would actually log out of the tool and just type your question as neutrally as possible. But you also want to be unique and different from what's already there. You want to make sure that you're adding a new insight. You want to make sure that what you have contains proof points, either directly in the piece, or maybe you're linking out to a case study you've written, or just making a little call out box where you're highlighting a quote or highlighting a stat. That can all help. And make sure you're not only remixing what already exists. I'm not saying anyone on this call would do that, but in the scope of the world, there are some folks whose approach to marketing is to really just look at what already exists and lift bits and pieces of it and put it on their own website. I mean, that is essentially what AI does. If you're having AI write a full blog post for you, it can't come up with any new ideas. So it's just remixing what already exists. So you don't want to do that yourself. You want to try and inject your own opinions and use cases and experience as much as possible. And that's another reason why it is preferable and better for search to write the content yourself, at least write the final draft that goes on your website yourself, versus using the AI, because you yourself can put in your own unique spin. You can make sure that you're not just remixing what already exists, which is what the AI does. Now, we talked earlier about the myths about why LLMs like certain content, and so we can debunk them clearly here. So it doesn't have to be by an AI. It should be by a human expert. That's going to go further in all kinds of search, including AI search. It doesn't need to look like AI, but it should follow an organized structure, because that is, one, easy for people to read, but two, it's easy for the AI to associate specific snippets of your text, like what it lifts and shows in its result, with specific queries. I like to use questions as, whenever possible, as subheads. Like if I'm writing an informational blog post and then I answer those questions, I will typically put in a few bulleted lists here and there if it makes sense. Maybe a table if I'm comparing, myself versus a competitor. All of these things present data in an organized way that both works for search purposes and also benefits the human who's going to read it in the end. You don't need to have a summary, but it should provide something new for the audience, or new within the realm of the search intent that you're targeting. And while you don't need to have a summarize with AI button, you do want to have signals on the page that you are trustworthy. That can include your byline with your name. It can include an author bio explaining the credentials of the person who wrote the blog post. It can be links to thought leadership that you've published previously. It can be links to case studies on your website. All of these things will actually help an LLM like your content more than those myths we talked about earlier on. And here is a little cheat sheet. Feel free to take a screenshot of it. You will also get a recording of this in your email right after the call. But when you think about what kind of content to have on your website, you want to make sure that you have in-depth blogs anytime it seems like someone is really seeking information out of a search. If someone's asking a how-to question, write up your content and include some lists and tables that someone could essentially use as a quick reference. When you're writing thought leadership, that is more often than not going to be targeted towards decision makers. Case studies are good for building a trust profile. So if you don't have any of that on your website, you have a brand new website, that can help build up those bona fides. If you find that there are some commercial searches driving AI traffic to your website, or you are selling a product that people can buy on your website, maybe prioritize in some of your comparison and informational blog posts explaining some of your services very clearly, explaining some of your products very clearly and succinctly, so that the AI can present that when it is preparing. Go back to think about how like 40% of the queries in AI are preparatory, like, hey, make me XYZ. So if you have some service and product descriptions on your site and scattered throughout your blog posts, it can help provide information for when AI is preparing a comparative list or preparing a guide for someone. Use first-person voice as much as possible to build expertise and your profile online. And don't shy away from those direct comparisons, such as X versus Y with the competitor. I know they can feel very uncomfortable. They're very useful for helping to guide the AI to figure out what you do and don't offer and how you are different from competitors. And that is very beneficial for, again, appearing in those documents and lists that it is preparing for someone. So now we do have some time for questions if anyone here would like to ask any. Otherwise, feel free to hop off. I hope everyone has a lovely day, and there will be a recording of this in your inbox. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that.